So I think we have enough people started. Rupesh sir, can we get started with it?
Yes, we should.
Awesome. Over to you, Rupesh sir.
All right. So thank you everyone on joining on a Saturday morning. I know these are tough times. I hope everyone is safe and sound with your families, friends, and once again a big thank you for taking a time out on a Saturday morning. Let me just share my screen and then we can get started. All right. So everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So for those who had attended the last week's session, right? So just a kind of summary of that session was what exactly is the consulting mindset, right? And which goes with the overall D2C theme, right? Where we focus majorly on how to develop a consulting mindset. So just a recap over here to begin with, consulting mindset is about art of listening, art of asking the right questions, and articulating your thoughts in a way that the recipient with whom you're talking or with whom you're exchanging communication can understand your thought process, right? So it's a mindset to me, and there are three pillars or three key attributes to this mindset. One is acquiring knowledge as much as possible. The depth and the breadth of Salesforce ecosystem is very huge. So continuously learning and acquiring more and more knowledge in this space will help you in all of these attributes, right? When you're listening to new requirements, when you're understanding different business scenarios, only if you have relevant knowledge, then only you'll be able to grasp all of that information. That itself will also provoke you to ask the right questions and the relevant questions to the business stakeholders, and also it will help you to express yourself. Applying that knowledge to the real world business problems is what I meant by analytical thinking. So how good are in your analytical thought process, where you can apply your Salesforce knowledge, X number of certifications, X number of trainings, but nothing can beat an on job experience, right? Where you apply the knowledge on real time projects. And the third piece of it is the communication. Are you able to clearly express yourself, whether it's through phone calls or through email communication? These are the three pillars of a consulting mindset, according to me. And I hope this resonates with each one of you as you move along ahead in your careers. So today we are going to talk about the pre-sales journey, right? So before that, let's look at what Mr. Einstein has said, right? If Mr. Einstein got a problem to solve at hand, he would have first spent 55 minutes trying to analyze the problem, understand the 360 context of that problem before jumping into the solution piece, right? Only and only if you understand the problem in its entirety, then you can probably come up with the right solution which works for the customer. And a right solution is not the solution which works for your developers or your development team, but the right solution is always which works for the end customer, right? So keep that always in mind, that do not jump to solutions, whether it's on pre-sales or in the delivery side. Always take time to understand the problem or the context of that problem in its entirety before you start asking questions or before you even try to solve it, right? So with that, let's look at what do we have today, right? So we have we'll divide the next two sessions in two parts, right? One is the entire pre-sales journey. Second is more of, if you have won that project, how will we go and deliver that project or the execution phase of that project, right? And there are nuances around the execution phase which we as developers or we as admins are not really aware of. People who have done project management, people who have got into the managerial space would have fair bit of understanding what all it takes to deliver a project. But I assume that we have a mixed audience over here, and the next session also will be fruitful for anyone who wants to move from who wants to get a more deeper understanding or a holistic view of what all goes in a in an implementation of a project, right? It's not just about delivering sprints. It's not just about developing user stories. It is, there are much more to it. There are much more phases to it, and where exactly you can contribute or where exactly you can look at growing yourself in your careers is where we will get to in the next session as well. So let's deep dive in the today's context around pre-sales, right? So what is pre-sales? Pre-sales is nothing but it's an art of acquiring new clients or acquiring a new customer or getting a new business, even if it is for existing customers. Getting the process of getting a new business or winning a new business for from a customer is what a pre-sales life cycle is all about, right? Now, where does the requirement originates on day one, right? So where does the entire CRM program definition, what do you mean by a CRM implementation, right? So somewhere on the client side, there are C-level stakeholders, there are business stakeholders, there are IT stakeholders who has a vision and a strategy to implement something, to achieve something, right? So a CEO or a COO or a CTO will have a vision in their mind that they want to achieve, let's say, 30% efficiency on their sales, year on year sales for their business over the next 2 years. Okay, that's their vision statement, that's their goal that they want to drive towards. And what do they need to drive those that vision forward? How do they execute that vision? That's where they lay down, okay, what is their current state, what is the future state that they're looking at, what is the strategy to achieve that vision, and how are they going to invest in the technology and the tools that they have at hand to achieve those visions and the goals that they have laid down, right? In order to achieve those visions and the goals, you need to have a detailed processes implemented. You need to have technologies, tools, applications in place, integrations in place, so that that will empower your end users or the business users to achieve those goals and metrics which are set up by the corporate vision or the strategy, right? And that's where a project plan or a program plan comes into the play, right? We often as developers do not get a deeper insight into all of this because nobody tells us this, right? How many of you here have really gone through a statement of work or a scope document for your projects, right? If you really go through those documents, you will understand what was the vision, what was the program objective all about, what kind of processes are we going to implement at a very high level, right? If it's a sales process, okay, what are the nuances around the sales process that we are going to deliver, what kind of integrations we are going to deliver, what kind of data migration effort we are going to take up, right? All of those things will make more sense to you only if you understand what were the initial business objectives laid down by the customer or your client in this statement of work. Or mostly people who are at on site, who are working closely with the customers, the leadership, right, the account leaders or the account managers will have a closer understanding to all of this, right? They define the program plan for us as developers to implement those program plan by delivering sprints as we go along, right? I hope this gives you enough clarity on where exactly we work and what's the larger game plan that any project would have to deliver something so that it meets the program objectives, and the program objectives will in turn mean that your business users or the client stakeholders will meet their vision that they had initially laid down for that entire program. With that, let's look at a problem statement, right? So our very good old friend Universal Containers is looking to move away from a legacy CRM solution to the state of the art CRM solution that is Salesforce, right? And they would like to implement sales, service, and communities for their partners and customers with an integrated solution to their backend ERPs, right? A very generic statement, a very generic problem where most of the implementations are currently being worked upon, right? Across customers, across companies, across partners, where we majority deal with the sales implementation, service implementation, or communities implementation, right? So trying to ensure that everybody aligns or understands this problem statement based on where exactly they are working. So let's look at what pre-sales is all about, right? Pre-sales is a process or a set of activities which the sales people normally carry before a customer is acquired or before a new business is acquired, right? It could be a new customer or an existing customer. Sometimes pre-sales can also extend into a period the product or service is delivered to the customer, right? So when I say the second half of this statement means that if you have an existing customer, you can still have pre-sales activity with those customers to acquire new business while you're continuing to serve that customer for a specific period, right? Let's say you're doing a sales cloud implementation for a project, you're already supporting that project, and customer comes up say we are interested in implementing communities for our partners, right? That's a new opportunity, new business opportunity for the company. So they'll go ahead and do the pre-sales life cycle for this new piece of work that they are trying to achieve. Let's look at what's the life cycle of a pre-sale is all about, right? So it typically begins with a customer or the client stakeholders floating out an RFP, right? Now there are various aspects to this pre-sales life cycle, okay? It may or may not originate with an RFP, okay? And we'll deep dive more further into what kind of three different types of requests that customers would normally ask for. If they don't have a trusted relationship with an existing partner, then they will float out an RFP, RFI, or an RFQ to understand more about the partners, who all are the qualified companies out there who can come in and implement their program, implement the vision that they have in first place, so that they can meet their business objectives, right? At times, if you already have so bigger companies or mid-sized companies, or if you have a client with whom you have been doing work on some other technology, let's say uh, Oracle or Microsoft, right, or SAP, and you have that trusted relationship with that customer already built in, right? Customer might not even look for other vendors in first place. They might just give the work of this new technology of Salesforce to you directly based on the relationship that the account manager on the onshore team might have directly with the customer, right? So pre-sales might have different variations based on the opportunity at hand. But in a nutshell, let's consider a very generic scenario that you don't have that initial relationship with that customer, and the customer wants to evaluate first, okay, who all are their partners, Salesforce partners out there in the market who can come and help us achieve our business objectives, achieve our vision that we are wanting to have for our business, right? So it typically begins with an RFI or an RFP, and we'll deep dive what an RFI or an RFP is in few moments from now. Once you get the RFP document or the requirements, a very high level requirements. Now these requirement detailing can also vary based on customer to customer. If the customer has a very good team on their side, they have a good understanding of their requirements, what they really want to implement, they will give you detailed requirements, right? But most of the often of the times customers don't really know the Salesforce world, right? They know what kind of business objectives that they want to achieve, and they will say, okay, we need sales processes to be implemented, or we need service processes to be implemented. Those are literally the high level requirements, and they ask the partners or the system integrators to come in and estimate and give up their plan or the proposal on how they will go about the entire implementation, right? So the first job of a pre-sales team is to understand the pain points. Why the customer in first place have floated out this RFP? Why is this requirement originated in first place? There has to be some problem somewhere that they have felt the need to implement a new system or a new process, right? Or a new tool like Salesforce, right? So really understanding the pain point and understanding how it relates to the business requirements and what kind of value add they want to bring to the overall program, to the overall vision of the company. That's the job of the pre-sales team to, as a first step, to understand really where exactly the pain point. So if you go to a doctor, right, and tell them you as a customer and the doctor as a company or the pre-sales team, right? Consider that analogy. You go and say, okay, I'm having a stomach ache or I'm having an headache, right? Now, these are all generic symptoms, right? It is for the doctor to really probe into what exactly is your problem statement, what are the symptoms, what are the pain areas, right? And then come up to a understanding that, okay, this might be the root cause, right? So that's how really the relationship between a pre-sales team and the customer works in the initial setup. Once they have understood the problem statement or the requirements as such, then they can build tailored POCs, whether it's technical POCs or let's say a functional demo of an existing solution that they might have to offer, right? Based on their requirements. They work, this pre-sales team work closely with the actual sales team. So there's a separate sales team who's trying to win this opportunity aggressively with the customer. And there is this pre-sales team, which is an extended arm of the sales team to help them win this customer by providing the right kind of technical documentation, by providing the right kind of estimates, by providing the right kind of technical solution, by providing the right kind of POCs or quick demos that the customer might want to see, right? And again, reminding you, the customer is evaluating different vendors at this point in time. So they really want to see who's the best of the best out there, right? Who can really understand their problem and can diagnose the right solution with the right skill set. When you go to a doctor with the pain point, right, you don't go to a doctor just once. I mean, just you don't go to just one doctor, right? Before going to that doctor, you just evaluate all possible options within your area. Even if you get the right skilled doctor or the best of the best doctor who is far away from your place, you don't mind traveling to that place and visiting that doctor, right? So same way, an client who wants to implement a project will look for a partner who is the best of the best, who has the right skill set, who has the right people, who has the right experience of delivering something like this, right? Let's say if you have a joint pain, you will not go to a regular MBBS doctor and say, okay, I'm having a joint pain, give me painkillers, right? You will obviously take your parents or whoever is having that pain to a specialist who can do that kind of a job, right? Who can diagnose that kind of a problem. So that's where the pre-sales team work closely with the sales team to offer the best possible recommendation, the best possible solution, the best possible effort estimates, the best possible tools and accelerators which the company might have built over a period of time, with the whole intent of winning that opportunity, winning that new business for your company, right? And once you have won that process of winning that customer or winning that new piece of work, the pre-sales team is in charge of handing over that work to the delivery team as well, right? So unless there is a good handshake between the pre-sales team and the delivery team, projects struggle because the handover was not smooth, right? Unless all the documentation that you have captured during the pre-sales life cycle is not documented very well and it's not handed over to your delivery team. And normally we all are in India specifically, we all are part of the delivery teams, right? We normally crib during projects that, okay, God knows who went and committed such and such scope within an aggressive timeline of, let's say, 5 weeks, 10 weeks. And this guy didn't even know, okay, how much effort it is going to take, right? And we all curse all of our pre-sales teams that people go and overcommit. People do not have the real understanding of Salesforce functioning, and they really go and sell a solution or commit a solution to the customer, which is practically not feasible within the given timelines, right? We all have faced these scenarios and we all understand the pain points. If a pre-sales team do not do a good job, it will reflect badly on the delivery team while delivering the project, right? That's why it's important to understand the relationship, how the pre-sales team works and how the delivery teams work. That will give you a holistic understanding of where exactly your career is shaped, right? What are you doing currently versus what are the different things around the project implementation. And that's what really the intent of D2C is all about, giving you the holistic view of where exactly you lie in the overall spectrum of delivering projects versus winning new projects versus your own individual growth as a professional, right? So that's the overall intent, and I hope you get something out of it. The last step is obviously when you give it over to the delivery team. The delivery teams goes and implements the project and later on supports the project. Most of the customers would not like to work with the same vendor, so they choose to have an implementation partner different than a partner who will do their support work, right? So you might have bigger customers working with more than 2 or 3 partners at the same time. There are some customers who would like to work with only with the same partner. So same partner will come in and implement, they will do the support work also. So you'll find various mixed scenarios where customers would prefer based on their experience, past experience, and based on their stakeholders, what they agree upon to work with different set of vendors. So what exactly is the role of a pre-sales professional? Let's say you are in a pre-sales team. What is expected out of you, right? So you are expected first to understand the business context, understand the 360-degree view of a business requirement, probe probe more into the requirements. So initially when you get the RFP document or the high level requirements, you might not get the complete picture of, okay, what that requirement means, or what is the system landscape of the client, what kind of integrations you really need to build or you need to forecast on, right? Your estimates. You really need to put your pre-sales hat on and understand what is the requirement, why do they need to implement this requirement, what are the adjacent dependencies of this requirement, and come up with a proposition. For you to do all of this, you need to ask the right questions, right? And that's where asking the right question is the first pillar or the important pillar of a consulting mindset. That will help you in your pre-sales journey as well. So that is number one. Second is, once you have understood the requirement, applying your Salesforce knowledge to implement that particular requirement, right? So what is your solution for that requirement? Propose the most optimal solution that would work for the customer, right? What kind of integration? So this customer might have already like 6 integrations in place. What is the best integration pattern to be applied for those integrations if they are not been built yet, right? And to do all of this, what are the effort estimates that you will need, right? How many people do you need? For how much time will you implement this project in? Can you deliver this project in let's say next 2 months versus let's say next 6 months? If you have 10 people, can you deliver it in 1 month? Versus let's say if you have 2 people or let's say 5 people, 5-member team, can you deliver it in 10 months versus 5 months? All kinds of permutations and combinations will come into play. As a pre-sales professional, you'll have to do the right kind of estimation, the right kind of solutioning, and then present it back to the customer, right? So you will be involved in documenting the overall proposal response as well, which we call it as RFP response document. And we'll look into the detailed structure of that, how that RFP response is typically formulated based on my personal experience over the years working in the pre-sale space, right? So it might not be the perfect or the ideal one. Every company has its own template, so I will request every one of you to go and check out the pre-sales document which your company uses. Typically these documents are not exposed to junior practitioners or developers or admins specifically. Typically your managers and above would have access to those documents, but I think there's no harm in asking, right? If you have the right intent to learn and if your project leadership is supportive of that, they will obviously share some information to you so that you get a sneak peek into all of this. So those were the very high level responsibilities of a pre-sales professional while working in a pre-sales environment. All right. So as I said earlier, there are 3 types of requests which normally a customer would have if they're working with a new system integrator or a new partner. They are trying to evaluate who is the right fit for them. So they'll initially begin with asking for the request for information, which is an RFI. RFI is nothing but they want to understand who all are there, different partners who are available or who can do the work for them, or who can come in and implement their solution or their project. Information is gathered at a very high level about what kind of practice do they have, how many people do they have in practice, what kind of previous projects that they have done, what kind of people skills that they have, right? And I have faced this, you would have also faced this, that project managers come up on a Friday evening and ask for a resume of yours in the company template, right? because they want to ship it to the customer based on an RFP response or an RFI response, that these are the people that we have who are our rock stars, technical rock stars, functional rock stars, who can deliver the project for you if you give us the project, right? And they already have like a Salesforce practice capability decks in place so that they can highlight, okay, how Salesforce as a practice they have in their companies, so that we are the best people to come and work for you. So that's at a very high level what a request for information would look like. Request for quotation is typically for industries like manufacturing or retail, right, where you have lot of suppliers who will directly give you a quote to deliver a piece of work, right? It doesn't really relate to an IT services kind of industry where normally no one will ask you directly for an RFQ, right? They will ask you more for an RFP, which is on the right hand side, right? But request for quote is basically, I have a defined set of work for you to do. Tell me what amount or what will you charge me to deliver that work, right? That is an RFQ in a nutshell. Request for quotation or request for quote. Request for proposal is where maximum of the times we end up working in the pre-sales environment, where customer is expecting you to detail out your response in a way that, okay, first, are you understanding my business objectives? Do you really understand my problem areas? Second, do you have the right kind of solution? So in an RFP response document, you will detail out your solution architecture, the different approaches that you will use to implement that project. What is the sprint timeline? How many people you will have on the project? What is the timeline that in which you can deliver? What is the overall effort estimate and the cost that you will charge me for delivering this project, right? What happens if a new work comes in? If a scope creep happens, what is the change management process? What is an escalation process if something goes wrong, right? If your team is not able to deliver, whom can I escalate it? So these are all the details that will go into a detailed proposal document when responding back to a request for proposal from the customer side. I hope this is very clear, and I've tried to simplify this in a way that you all can understand what it really means. Let's look at the different stages once an RFP comes into a company. It is typically received by your account managers who are directly in touch with the customer, or your sales account managers, right, who are out there looking for new customers. Once the RFP is received and they scan through the documents and understand the initial ask, there is typically a go no go decision. Now every company may or may not follow each of these steps, okay, based on the size and the complexity of the requirements, and also the size of the practice, right? Not all companies follow all of these due process, but I'm taking a very generic view of most of the companies who would follow all this, right? For global customers, global companies who do global Salesforce implementations. So typically there is a go no go decision, and a no go could be on multiple reasons, right? Now you can ask, okay, why will a company say no to a proposal? Don't we require more work for our people? Answer is yes, but not always. There is a, you have to evaluate, okay, so if the RFP is for implementing something which you don't have expertise on, you don't have the right people to do an implementation, right? Then you will say, okay, I don't want to get into this, because the entire pre-sales life cycle is also a time consuming effort. You need to have a team who can work on it, right? Often these are like short sprints or short turnaround time, 2 weeks to 4 weeks. You will never find a pre-sales life cycle going around for like months, unless it's like a global transformation for a client, big program, millions of dollars at stake, right? Only then you'll have a pre-sales cycle going around for, let's say, 6 months to 1 year. But typically our pre-sales life cycle is mostly around 2 weeks to 4 weeks, or max 8 weeks, right? That's how the short the cycle is. So you really need to understand and take a quick decision on whether you want to put the bet in there or not, right? Whether you want to invest that much amount of time in responding back to a customer, and then ultimately turning the customer might turn you down because you don't have the right kind of people or the skill set, or whether you have done that kind of work in the past or not, right? Whether you have the enough case studies or enough qualifications to do all of that work or not, right? So those are some of the parameters at which you might tend to say, no, I don't want to do this RFP, or I don't want to get into this because I know I have a very slim chance of winning this. And instead of that, let me focus my efforts on something where I have more confidence or more probability of winning that work. Okay. Let's say the decision is go at this point in time, right? And the pre-sales team is formed, and the different stakeholders could be some people from on-site, some people from offshore, who can work together on this entire RFP. They will go through the requirements document and put up an initial questionnaire, because as I said, you need to probe. You need to ask the right questions so that you can come up with the right kind of estimates, right kind of solution, right kind of assumptions. Only once you have the right clarity around the business context. How you get the clarity? By putting up those initial questionnaires. If this is for a global customer, for a large implementation, you typically have multiple teams. So there will be a Salesforce team, there will be a MuleSoft team, there will be, let's say, an Oracle or a Microsoft team as well into the mix. And you all need to collaborate on the same RFP. So in such scenarios, you might also have an RFP tracker where the pre-sales team might have one person who will coordinate with all of these teams and will maintain a central sheet somewhere in the SharePoint or somewhere in the whichever shared tool you're using, to document all the action items, to document all the dependencies, to document who is going to provide what kind of information by what date and time, right? So that RFP tracker really helps all the teams to work towards a common goal so that you all can respond with the best possible manner within the scheduled time, so that you can give away the response document back to the customer before the deadline, right? And typically when the RFP comes, they come up with a deadline date. Okay, by this date you need to give the response document. By this date we'll have post your response. They will call you for interviews or orals, right? Where they will do further evaluation. So all of these dates are already set by the RFP document, which you initially get from your customer. The next step in the process is basically to set up the entire proposal response document, and there is always a template in every company. Ask for your leaders, your project managers to share those templates with you so that you can learn more about them. And if they are not in a position to share all of that information to you, at least ask them to explain you what all things they really work on, right? So that you get a good understanding of all of that. Once the proposal document has been prepared, right, the official response has been prepared, it goes into multiple level of reviews. It goes for an internal review where the project leadership, the practice leadership will come together. Typically the senior managers, the directors, account managers, all of these group of people will come together and review your response, whether the solution looks right, whether the approach looks right, whether the estimates are fine, whether the margins that we are going to earn are fine or not, the profit is not getting hit, right? All of those factors taken into consideration, and then it goes for a legal review, because legal needs to vet out that whatever terms and conditions are up there in that statement of work or in that proposal document is applicable for you as a company. So legal team basically protects you from anything which might be a loophole in the overall agreement, right? So they put the legal lens on the entire document and understand whether any terms and conditions will not put your company in the bad space or in the bad spot. Once everything is done, that's when the RFP is submitted back to the customer. Upon submission, the client might ask for the vendors to come and present their response as well at times, and that is what we call it as orals. And if you have proposed a working solution which you already have as an accelerator, they might ask you to demo that solution as well, so that they understand, okay, how well ahead in the game you are when you're proposing that particular tools or accelerator, which will help them to save some time or save some cost in their overall project implementation. Then there are rounds of negotiation with the account team and the client stakeholders, and ultimately you win or lose on an RFP, right? And that's how you get a new project. Or you, at times from India, when we contribute towards this pre-sales, we don't hear back whether we got that project or not, right? And we are always in the impression or in the perception that we have given our best solution as a technical person, but we didn't got that project. What went wrong? Was the solution not right, or was it something else, right? So there are multiple factors why a RFP is won or why an RFP may get lost, right? And depends upon the skills, the experience, the cost, and the relationship that you might have with the customer, right? So there could be multiple various factors, not just the solution. So don't feel bad if you lose an RFP, because there are also external factors which might influence an RFP decision. Like, who all are involved in an RFP or in a pre-sales team, right? So an engagement team or an account team from on-site, which is typically comprising of your account manager or onshore consultants. These are functional consultants or technical consultants who can work directly with the customer during their time zone. And there is this offshore delivery team who is responsible of delivering that project once the pre-sales cycle is over, right? So they involve the management team, the project managers, the architects, the functional consultants in the pre-sales team, so that they are aware of how the deal is being constructed. So once you get the business, it is the same team or a new set of people with whom they can coordinate and deliver this project in the long run, right? Developers are typically kept away from this overall pre-sales life cycle, and they have a limited exposure to it. And typically these exposures are limited to, let's say, if they want to try out a new app exchange app, or they want to try out a new, they want to do a technical feasibility of a new integration, right? That's where they will involve the developers to just try out those quick things so that they can do the POC or the demo to the customer, right? Developers may or may not be involved at times on doing direct estimations for an RFP, but if you get a chance, go for it. Grab all of these opportunities, because this will basically give you a lot more exposure than you can get in your just project development work, right? So always look out for these opportunities on working in pre-sales, because that will help you grow in the consulting mindset, applying that mindset and growing as a consultant in the long run. Let's look at how the RFP layout looks like, right? So as I said in the few minutes back, right, you begin with an executive summary of what that project is all about, right? You then give a brief about what is your company looking like, what how good is your Salesforce service, how, since how long your company is in existence, how many officers do you have, how big is your team, right? So basically it's giving them a snippet of what your company is all about, right? Then deep diving into business objectives. What is the real objective of the overall program? How it will help the business to achieve their vision or the goals that they have sent out, right? So what is the expectation and what is the value add you will be bringing to the table to meet those objectives? So that this RFP response document, right, is read by all the C-level stakeholders and the key stakeholders within the business, right? So you really need to give them the view of why you are the best choice or why you are the right choice for going ahead with this project with your company, right? So you need to really understand that context, because most of the times we tend to ignore all of these sections because we feel that, okay, this is all jargon and this is all like marketing stuff, why should we even care about it, right? But these are important aspects when you put up a formal response to win a new business work. The scope of work, and before scope of work, our understanding of your requirements is very important to articulate their requirements in your understanding, because only then you'll be able to relate to their requirements, and customer might also feel confident, okay, this vendor really understands what we are really looking for, right? So even if it is a repetitive of what they have said in their requirements, put it in your words on what do you really understand of those requirements. Because if there is a disconnect, initial disconnect in understanding the requirement itself, then no matter how much effort you have spent on providing the right solution, providing the right estimates, all of that has gone in vain because you have not understood the requirement in first place, right? So our understanding of your requirement is very important. And then it comes to the scope of work. Scope of work is the most critical aspect of your response document, because that's where you define boundaries against your implementation work that you're going to deliver, right? Because if you just, if the RFP document, let's say, has given, let's say they want to do data migration, and if you have not put in right assumptions or right scope in your response document, then you end up working more, because data migration could comprise of 10 objects versus 100 objects, 5 million roads to, let's say, 50 million roads, right? One environment or 5 environments where you want to do the data loads, right? So all of these will factor in on how much effort and time you will take to deliver that project, right? So in order to ensure that your project doesn't get overburnt, where your developers or your teams do not get burned during the delivery phase, you have to scope in the right side of the right amount of work and with the right assumptions, so that you define walls for yourself as a project delivery team. Tomorrow, if there is any contention on the scope creep, you might have all of these response documents as formal documents where you have clearly called out that this will be my scope of work, right? And that's where documentation like these are very important. We often have a hate relationship with the documentation, but documentation really plays a key important role when things go wrong. Nobody will ask for these documents once they have been delivered, as long as the project is in green. The moment projects start turning towards orange and red, that's when people will ask from both the sides, from your company side also and from the client side also, okay, what was agreed upon, whether you have delivered all that was agreed upon or not, what is the additional time that you're going to take, what is the cost impact, right? At the end of the day, every company thinks about dollar amount, right? So in a nutshell, you have to define your scope of work, define areas that you're going to work upon, and if there is any scope exclusion according to you, you should clearly call it out in this document, okay? So that if there is any ambiguity or any communication gap, you iron it out during the pre-sales life cycle itself. Your delivery team will not have to spend hours and hours on debating with the customer, okay, why this was included and why they think this is out of scope. Next, deep diving into the solution and the delivery approach. How are you going to, what is the solution that you're proposing for those requirements? What is the mapping of your solution to your business requirement? What's the overall system architecture going to look like? What is the current architecture and what's going to be the to be architecture? What is the implementation approach? Are you going to go for the waterfall model, or are you going to go with the agile approach? Is it going to be a hybrid approach, right? So how are you going to deliver your sprints? Who will be your scrum masters? Come up with a project plan, come up with a timeline proposal, and what are your key assumptions going into the delivery phase, right? Who all will be part of your team? You don't give actual names like person X and person Y will be in my team. You will say, okay, a solution architect, 5 developers, 1 team lead, 1 tester. In a generic way, you define the roles who will be part of the delivery team, right? So that the client understands, okay, there will be a team of 15 people who will come and deliver this project for me. What is the governance model across this project, right? If this project has been awarded to this company, what is the project management look like? What kind of reporting will be done to me? What kind of weekly reports, monthly reports will be shared to me? How will I measure the progress? If there is anything happening not as per the timeline, whom should I escalate? If there is net new work, how can we decide whether this was part of an existing agreed scope of work, or whether this is something which is net new and it is a scope creep, right? So what is the aspect of change management? How do you handle new changes to the existing scope? How the company will deliver training for their end users or for their key business stakeholders or the super users, right? Do they have prior experience in delivering something similar, right? If there are any risks that they identified, the partner has identified any risk in implementing this entire program, what are the risks and what is their mitigation plan? How are they going to mitigate it, right? So let's say if you have some dependency on the client side, client team needs to deliver some work before you can build that integration. And if they don't deliver that integration, their side of work in time, it might hit your project timeline, right? So you need to call out those dependencies, the risk around it, and how will you mitigate those risks? One thing which I've learned in my professional career, right, is when you highlight a problem statement, you also give a solution with it. No leader would like to just hear problems from you. If you have a solution to it, go with the problem along with the possible solution. They will appreciate that a lot. Okay. And same goes with the customers as well. If you are identifying a risk, go with a mitigation plan. Customers would really like to work with vendors who can come up with a mitigation plan on their own, rather than just saying, no, this is your problem and you deal with it. We will not move on our project timelines because you have not delivered this. No, it is a collaborative effort. It is a joint relationship between the company and the customer to deliver that project, right? So that's where that trust gets built, and that's where we call it as a trusted relationship between a client and the vendor. Finally, you wrap it up with the commercials. What is going to be the X dollars or X euros or X pounds to deliver that project, and whether that how are you going to charge back to the customer? Is it going to monthly billing, quarterly billing, annual billing, so and so forth. And you can go deep into the different pricing methodologies that you would apply. Every company has their own pricing methodology, so I won't go deep into it. And what are your acceptance? Who from the both the sides, who are the designated signatories from both the vendor as well as from the client side, who can sign this offer and sign this entire document and issue the statement of work. Okay. With that, I'll give you guys a standard Salesforce documentation which describes the implementation approach. And this is an important document for every developer to go through, because then you will relate to your day-to-day project work, how your implementation has been done. Can you bring more optimization based on the Salesforce recommended way of implementing projects, right? If you're deviating from that, why are you deviating? So all of that understanding and self introspection of why do we do projects in a specific way, why not the ideal way, will give you more learnings. These are non-technical learnings, but this will help you evolve as a consultant or as a professional as well. I guess you are all aware of waterfall and agile ways of working, right? Waterfall is nothing but you start off with the project or the requirements, and you deliver, you build the entire all the requirements, and then you have the sprint demos or the actual walkthrough of the demos or the UAT directly at the last, when let's say 2 weeks before the production go live. The challenge in the waterfall model was that the customers might see the application just before few weeks of going into the production, and they might say, okay, not this is not what we expected, right? This was not was what this is not what was our requirement in first place. You have not understood our requirement clearly, and that led to a lot of ambiguities, lot of delivery challenges for projects. That's where the agile became popular, and we all work today in agile world. Not purely agile, because we kind of work in the hybrid model, and that's why I said that scope and the business will typically drive the nature or the method that you want to apply in your projects, right? Purely agile is that you don't even have the requirement. You start the sprint delivery. Before every sprint, you will define a list of user stories that to be delivered in each sprint. You build during that sprint of 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and then do the sprint demos, take the feedback, and then build iteratively on top of it. That's pure agile for you. But in a hybrid agile model, you get the requirements, and then you bucket out. Let's say if you have 100 requirements, you bucket, let's say 10 requirements every sprint, and then you deliver those sprints in an agile mode, right? So you have flavors of both waterfall and agile into it, and that's why we call it as hybrid agile. And that's the max percentage of projects which are executed in. Very few projects in purely agile mode, very few projects in purely waterfall mode that we deliver these days across the industry. Now, next few slides, I'll give you a sneak peek into my learnings as a consultant when I was growing up. When I was pushed into first time for doing pre-sales work, I was clueless about how to go about estimates. Okay, I was given requirements in an Excel file, let's say 100 requirements, 100 line items. I was told to come up with an estimate. Okay, so what I did was I took that Excel sheet. I went through each of those requirements based on my understanding of Salesforce knowledge. I put some R's against each of those line items, and then I did a sum of all of those line items to come up with this fourth line item over here. Total SFDC, design, build, unit testing. It does not include the integration and the data migration efforts. And let's say it was sum of all the line items where I have estimated, let's say 100 hours. Okay. Then I have to include some data migration effort. I don't know what kind of data migration I'm getting into. These are all guess estimates, right? So I have to take assumptions that, okay, I will do data migration for X objects, X volume. And I would say, okay, if I have come up to, let's say 100 hours of work to deliver those requirements, I will take, let's say 15 hours to do the data migration effort. Similarly, on the integration side, I don't know much details around integration, but I am taking a guess estimate here that I will take 20 to 30% of the overall effort, right? So this way I am trying to add each and every phase or each and every work item which I'm going to work on that project if I get the delivery of that project, right? Or if I won that project. So data migration, integration, internal testing, SIT, UAT, user trainings, documentations, deployment efforts, post go live support, and the PMO, which is the local India management team, right? Who will provide oversight and coordination with the entire project team. Initial Salesforce setup time. Pre-game is mostly a discovery or the requirement gathering phase, which is typically 2 to 4 weeks, right? So you have those work items listed as different Excel items, and then you put in your effort estimates for each of those items so that you don't leave out any area that you might have to work during a project implementation. Now, how to go about preparing a staffing model, right? So how do you really estimate I will need X days, X weeks, and Y number of people in my project, right? So what I would do is based on the different work items that I had listed initially. So I would include SFDC design, build, unit testing, integration, testing, UAT support, deployment, and post go live support, right? All of these as different phases of my project, and then I will put it out on the right hand side, the weeks that I will take for each phase to be delivered, right? So my initial phase of design and build, design would be, let's say, 4 weeks. Build and unit testing on what I have gone through the requirements based on whatever I've done as the line item level effort estimates, right? Can you guys hear me still?
Yes, Rupesh, we can.
Okay, sounds good. So based on the work that I have estimated, I need to come up, okay, how many weeks I'm going to take, and I have to go phase by phase, and I have to estimate, okay, I will be able to deliver all the phases of the project by, let's say, 10 weeks or 12 weeks. Now, if I have to deliver work for 12 weeks, how many people do I need on the team to deliver that work? What are the different roles, right? Are there any PTOs or vacations in that entire calendar of 10 weeks? Are there people who are going to go on vacations, right? I have to consider all factors. And then on the right hand side, I've done simple math. Okay, if I have a person for 10 weeks, 10 into 5, which means 50 days of work into 8 hours or 9 hours, whatever you're billing to the client, will give me 10 into 5 into 8 will give me 400 hours, right? So that way I will come up with the overall effort estimate of, let's say, 1000 hours or 5000 hours for my overall project. And then you add some contingency or some buffer on top of it so that you take care of any risk or any mitigations that you would like to do as part of the overall plan. So this gives you enough understanding of what all goes into a project estimation. Okay, you may or may not follow the same kind of methodology over here which I have depicted. These are all my learnings over the years, right? So every company has their own templates and their own ways of working with respect to the staffing model and the nuances around it. So I will highly recommend everyone to go back to your leadership and to your projects and understand how do they do, right? So that you get more clear understanding of things to be done. Estimation techniques. Now there are three types of estimation techniques. Line item level estimation, which I just explained, that if I get the requirements in an Excel format, I will just go about high, medium, low complexity levels and then put in X number of hours against each of them. Story points based estimation, if you are working on, if you get not the exact requirements but the user stories at a very high level, how would you go doing estimation based on stories? Again, story points are linked to X number of hours, so ultimately you turn out to be evaluating how many hours you're going to take for delivering that story point, right? Or that user story. But if the user story is complex, you go for a higher story point, versus if a user story is simple or medium complex, then you go for a lower story point. T-shirt size based estimation is again something which is used in most of the projects, where you define the user story by t-shirt sizing, whether it's small, large, XL or double XL, and based on that it has a mapping to X number of hours in the background, so that you come to the right kind of effort estimates. At the end of the day, each of these technique is to evaluate how many hours you're going to take to deliver that story, right? Or that requirement. Change management, again, I have a document for you. Again, it's a SanDisk Salesforce document. If you Google for it, you will easily get a hands-on to it. Go through that document because it gives you a good enough perspective of how do you handle changes once you have delivered the project, right? How do you go about minor releases, major releases, quarterly releases? What should be a release cycle? How do you handle big changes, small changes, all of that? How do you handle doing changes directly on production versus following the normal SDLC life cycle, right? All of those nuances are clearly detailed out on this document. So feel free to go through this document. Lastly, I would like to cover if you've been called for orals, right? Let's say you have submitted your response to the customer and they want you to come and present that entire document to the client stakeholders, right? So typically the account managers, the project leadership or the practice leadership will go and present on these orals. I have been fortunate to take part in some of these orals, right? And I have visited client locations abroad to deliver this. And my learning from these experiences was that when I was a senior consultant in a company in my past experience, and when I was doing it for the first time, I was totally clueless of what orals are all about, right? And we went ahead with a deck, preparing a deck between me and my colleague. We went there, and when a senior person from our own company came and he reviewed the content, right? And he was like, "This is all crap. There has to be a method, there has to be a structure to a document," and that's where I've learned the importance of structuring your PPT or structuring your document before going into any presentation. So at a very high level, what I've learned is you should start with an introduction. Why are you here for? What is the context of the discussion? What are the business objectives of the client, right? So since we are going to present the RFP response document, your content cannot be different from what you have already submitted, right, in the Word document. So it should cover in a nutshell, in a very summarized manner, whatever you are trying to convey in 50-page document. This should be a 10 slider deck where you are trying to put all the information in a concise manner and trying to cover each aspect of it. So you'll explain what are the business objectives, your understanding of the business objectives, your approach towards solving the business problem, your technical solution for it, your as is versus to be architecture, tools and accelerators, value proposition, your resource mix and the skill sets for each of the resource that you will bring onto the table, and your effort estimates, right? That will give them a concise view of what the overall vendors or the Salesforce partner strategy is for implementing their project. Based on that understanding, there will be few Q&A sessions, there will be few rounds of negotiations, and the project might get awarded or the project might get lost. It's a weekend, it's a COVID time, so let's be happy that we have got this project. And with that, I'll wrap up my session. And over to you, Sushant or Sagar. Do you want to play Kahoot now, or do you want to first take Q&As and then we go into Kahoot?
Thank you, Rupesh, for sharing this knowledge with us. Like due to some technical issue, we have skipped that introduction part. Now I will cover that part, and after that we will go with the Q&A session, and then we will play the Kahoot session. So let me
Awesome.
share my screen.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go. Now, so good morning, everyone. So my name is Sachin Kumar, and I'm 2X certified. I'm closely associated with New Delhi Developer Group. This is my Twitter handler, twitter.com SachinForce. I have more than 5 years of experience in Salesforce domain, but today I'm hosting this session, but due to some technical issues, I was not properly introduce yourself. So I'm like taking this one right now. So today, as you know, we have the pre-sales lifecycle journey for D2C. So our host, our today's speakers are well-known person, Rupesh Bhatia sir, who has 2X MPP, D2C advocate, and 17 certified application and system architect. So I will like to thanks Rupesh sir, like for sharing those knowledge with us. Let's move to our next slide. So we are the New Delhi's developer group. So we are in the community from February 2016, and this is our Twitter handler, twitter.com New Delhi SFDC Dev. This our hashtag impact Salesforce Saturday. This is our initiative. So we also have our website, that is New Delhi SFDC Doug, and this is our Trailblazer community group. That's it, bit.ly.New Delhi SFDC. You can go and check out the New Delhi initiatives and what are the things available over there using that website. Okay, so now move to the Impact Salesforce Saturday. Impact Salesforce Saturday is a series of online Salesforce Saturday sessions. It is a program that was run by New Delhi Developer Group. So previously that was known as Virtual Salesforce Saturday, but now we have rebranded it at Impact Salesforce Saturday. You can find our upcoming and past session on these links, which we will provide after that introduction part in the chat window. So you can go over there and please check like what is our upcoming session and what happened in post sessions. So like as I told you, New Delhi SFTC developer group has taken several initiatives. So one new initiative which New Delhi developer group has recently taken care, that is Talent Central. So the vision of that Talent Central is something like similar to Naukri.com and Monster and Indeed.com. That is something who is looking job in the Salesforce system, so they can connect over there, and we also connecting with HRs as well. Most of the companies are registered over there. Over 200 plus students are, and the job seekers who is looking for job in Salesforce system are registered on that portal. So I will urge to each and everyone who is looking the job in Salesforce ecosystem, and any student who is like grow their career in Salesforce system, so can join over there. We have like very good number of HRs who is looking the candidate who have experience in Salesforce system. So okay, let's move to our next initiative that we have Mentorship Central. So Mentorship Central is something like to interact a mentee and a mentor. Like if someone is looking to grow their career, like to achieve something in Salesforce system, he is currently is in Salesforce system, but he want to like go to up to the next level. So he can register as a mentee, and we will provide you the mentor for that one, who will guide the with a guided path, like what is the next step for that one. So that that mentorship central portal will help those one who is like grow their career in Salesforce system that way. So here is the link of that one, bit.ly SF mentorship central. So you can join this as a mentor or mentee. And at the last, we are like to thanks our sponsors, Walid Alhor and Cloudvana and Grey Ops, like for sharing these Impact Salesforce Saturday. And one more thing which I would like to introduce over there. So in this overall session series, D2C series, we are giving 20 certification voucher to the winner candidate. So the rule of that certification, Udemy vouchers for sharing and visibility. So the rule of those course vouchers, that is something like for each session we have 5 Kahoot winner, and for overall series we have 5 social media winners. So you can do one thing, you can like take the hashtag Impact Salesforce Saturday, hashtag D2C, and @New Delhi SFDCs. These are the 3 tags, and post whatever you have learned today, or post our upcoming sessions on Twitter, like LinkedIn. Based on that, we will like choose 5 winners at the end of the series, and we will like provide the Udemy sharing and visibility course to his email ID. So this is the, and now I'm like covering that quiz rule for today. So guys, please put your correct name in the Kahoot, and after that, once winner will decide. So winners, please share your exact email ID which you want to like configure that Udemy account. So we will activate that sharing and visibility course into that one, into that email ID. So we configure these things. So please share that email ID on which you want to configure that Udemy account. So this is it, like for the introduction part, and I will urge to each and everyone, please take a picture and post it on Twitter with hashtag D2C at hashtag Impact Salesforce Saturday and @New Delhi SFTC group. So let's take a question and answer, and after that Rupesh will continue the Kahoot session. Over to you, Rupesh.
All right, I don't see any Q&As in the chat window at least. So if you guys have anything, please unmute yourself and go ahead with your questions. Okay, Kahoot is basically a gaming platform where you basically need to go to the link which I have provided and enter this pin. You will enter into a quiz. We'll share the questions on the screen, and you'll have to pick up answers on your side and submit them. Whoever does it in the fastest manner will basically be on the leaderboard. Hey, Sagar or Sachin, can you make provision that the users can unmute to ask questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I've got one question from Ketan who says importance of change management in Agile, right? It's highly important because when you're working in an Agile, right, what you get is the high level requirements, right? Your understanding, your perception about that requirement might be different from what your business is expecting you to deliver, right? So that's where scope creeps, and having debates or arguments over emails is a common like a common scenario where we all face, right? That's where having a more formulated or a more structured change management process in place will help you in handling any of the scope creep discussions in a formal manner in the Agile world, right? Okay, so there's a request that instead of speaking up, you can put your questions in the chat window itself. So Neha, if you can put up your question on the chat window. What are the best ways for demand generations? I assume that your question is more linked to how are the ways in which you get more requests for proposals or to demand more business opportunities, right? And that's a typical role for a sales team or a marketing team. Both the teams need to collaborate and work together hand in hand to demand or generate more demand for your business, right? Pre-sales team will come in after that, and they play a kind of a supporting role or a supplemental role once you get the initial request, right? So effective ways to reach out to the customers, again, it's a core skill set of a marketing team or a sales team, right? And every company has their own strategy. I would not be able to share any specific insight because I have not played those roles yet. I've done a lot of pre-sales effort on my side, so that's what I can share really from my experience. How to make sure delivery and pre-sales team work collaboratively. So I think the linking point between both of them is the strong documentation, right? So pre-sales team might go on to the next pre-sales opportunity once the project is won, right? And once it is handed over to the delivery team, right? But having a strong documentation, having a strong technical architecture or the solution document which they had committed to, having all of that documented and handed over to the delivery team will be always in a good will help you in the delivery phase as well, right? So, and what has helped me is I was leading some of the RFPs in the past, and I went on to deliver those projects as well. So, as a technical architect, I was leading some of the pre-sales effort from the India, and I went on to deliver the same project. That gives me a holistic understanding of what exactly the nuances are, right? But if you really talk from not from an individual standpoint, but from a team standpoint, I think the documentation is the main link over here. Pre-sales team actually is limited to technical skills. So I think Himanshu is asking that pre-sales team actually is limited by the technical skills of developer in the company. Being a developer, I understand that a pre-sales member must have good knowledge of how platforms like MuleSoft, Tableau, etc. works. Pre-sales needs to get in touch with developers during RFP cycle. So yeah, a good question, Himanshu. So pre-sales team, right? It comprises of many stakeholders. It's not just the developer or not just the account managers or the project managers, right? So I had a slide on the stakeholders, right? But developers typically are involved in doing the estimations or doing some technical POCs, which the pre-sales team wants to go back to the customer and deliver or show them that this is how technically certain requirements are feasible, right? Pre-sales team will have a mix of functional, project management, and the technical people as part of that team so that they can get inputs from all of their expertise areas, right? So project manager will basically focus more on change management process, implementation methodology, implementation approaches, right? All of that will be a project management effort. Reviewing the estimates, ensuring that all the resource skills and the past case studies, all of those are collaborated and collated from various teams, put together in the formal document. That all is a part of the project management team. Technical team will basically focus on solutioning, coming up with the right architecture, coming up with the right solution approaches, integration patterns, data migration approaches, or coming up with effort estimates for each of those requirements and then giving it to the project management team for them to further refine and hand it over. Developers role is limited. Yes, I agree. Pre-sales team consider this more as a yourself as individuals, more as a consultant, right? So consultant need not have knowledge just about Salesforce or just about any other technology, right? They should have a broader spectrum, and that's what consulting mindset is all about. You should have your ears and eyes open to understand the landscape of the customer, because customers don't just have Salesforce in their landscape, right? And that's what will help you. This mindset will help you in your architect journey as well. People who want to become CTAs, right? The architect mindset is all about understanding the wider landscape and being the having the experience and the exposure of an enterprise wide understanding of a landscape, right? Where you might have one technology, you might have 5 different technologies, how the different information flows, how all the systems come together to deliver the value that the business is looking for, right? That overall perspective really helps in these pre-sales conversations. So I think as a developer, what I'm advocating for is that people should have the consulting mindset. I'm not talking about the titles over here, that you get a job title as consultant, no. But you should have that consulting mindset so that you can broaden your knowledge, broaden your horizons so that you can grow as a professional. Ketan has a question. Have you ever experienced about time estimations to clients different than offshore development or deliver time? If can't deliver on time, how do you handle the situations, right? So yes, there have been many projects. I would have experienced it. Many people on this call would have experienced it. Everybody experiences this, right? That the time given as a commitment to deliver something is not enough to deliver something which was not initially fairly estimated on, right? And typically these challenges come in because if the pre-sales team has not done a good job of understanding the initial requirement, if they have not done a good job of writing down the scope of work, if they have not done a good job of writing down the right assumption, that is where this whole session on giving you insights of how pre-sales lifecycle works. So tomorrow, if you are in the part of pre-sales team, you guys as individuals can do the right thing, right? So that your delivery teams do not face the burn, right? So how do you handle it? By ensuring that you are understanding the requirement, you are having clear documentation around what was committed to, right? What are your assumptions? What are your scope of work that you have signed up for? Are you doing the estimates in the right way, right? So there's every company puts a lot of effort in doing the estimations the right way, doing the project management the right way, right? And yes, it's a nature of the business that you may or may not have always a clear agreement with the business, right? And that's part and parcel of the game. But as long as we as individuals do the right thing, I think it will help the overall pre-sales team and the overall delivery team as well, right? So we play an important role. That's how I look at it. And every individual, if they can do their bit, overall the situation would improve. Pre-sales, yes, I mean, it's not just for developers, right? For any person who is there in Salesforce ecosystem should have exposure to pre-sales, because that broadens your understanding of the overall ecosystem. In a development phase, right, or in your role as a developer, you're limited to the project that you're working on. Okay, and if you're working on a long-term engagements, you might end up spending, let's say, 1 year, 2 years just doing a sales project, just delivering. Even at times I've seen people not even having a clear understanding of a sales process, because they do not relate to the business world. They just focus on delivering the user stories that are assigned to them, and at the end result, what happens is that because you have, let's say, 2 years or 4 years of experience in Salesforce, your expectation with respect to your peers or the market is skyrocket, but your growth as a professional is not that much, because you have really not understood the game, right? The overall sales process, the business requirements. So it's really, this whole D2C series about opening up your minds to understand that there is a lot more than development that goes in the Salesforce ecosystem, and you all should look forward to expand your roles, expand your contributions, so that you as individuals can grow in your careers. My focus here is not just to promote pre-sales. I'm not here to promote pre-sales, right? I'm here to understand every developer out there that there is so much to learn, there is so much to explore, there is so much to try your hands on, that we don't do it because we are not aware of it. And this is more of an awareness session from my side, this whole campaign of D2C, that people should realize what all they can do, right? It's not just about those developing those user stories, or not doing sprints and then saying that, okay, my job is done, right? If you want to grow, you need to at least be aware. Now, to take that effort on getting into all of these or not, I'll leave it up to you. But my job is to make that awareness among the community that there is more to it than what you really work on. All right. Where we manage the pre-sales in our CRM. So CRM, okay, so when you say CRM, right, it's customer relationship management. We as developers or as admins configure the CRM for our customers, right? Similarly, every company has the CRM solution for themselves also, right? At the end of the day, CRM begins with a lead and closes out with an opportunity, right? So the whole process of lead to opportunity or lead to cash is a CRM process, a sales process, right? IT companies have their own sales process to win new customers or new business. That pre-sales is a part of that sales process. Okay. The process to help the sales team to acquire new business is pre-sales, right? So the way you develop or implement solutions for your customers, somebody within your company would have developed a sales process for your own team to deal with new projects. How do you go about winning new business or new projects is part of your CRM implementation internally. I hope that answers your question, Madhu. All right. If we don't have any more questions, can we switch on to Kahoot?
Yes, Rupesh, we can switch to Kahoot.
Awesome. I'm going to share my screen again, and I see few folks have already joined in. 17 of them have already joined in. How many we have? We have 29. I should expect at least 25 of you to be in there.
So guys, please use www.kahoot.it, and this is the game pin 5283124.
Okay.
Please join this one.
So names like Speedy Echidna 77, we would need your Aadhaar card to prove that that is your name. And Diligent Wildcat 38, your Aadhaar card should also mention this name for us to give you your, if you win the Kahoot, then giving away those courses.
This option should be provided in Kahoot as well. Everybody can share your Aadhaar card.
No, I'm just kidding, guys. But if you put up your real names, we'll understand who won it, right? And we can give you the vouchers. The team can help you out over there, right? If you put up these wild names or mock names, it will not help us identifying the right person. Even if you win it, then it will be a challenge. All right, Kahoot is going to be interesting because I have come up with 10 questions, which is basically based on whatever we have discussed today, right? And if you have understood well, you'll win the Kahoot. As simple as that. All right, we can get started. We have 25 people over here. I think the organizers of this event are not eligible, and myself, I'll not be in there. So let's begin. Are you guys ready? 3, 2, 1, let's go. So the first question itself is a multi-select, and it will give you double the points. So who all are part of your pre-sales team? Account managers, technology experts, project managers, business analysts. It's a multi-select, right? So you can choose more than one as well. All right, I see minimum of 7 people who would have answered both, all of them, right? So yes, all of them are required as part of pre-sales team. Megha is on the top, Umang and Ankit are trailing her. Let's go to the next one. What do you mean by B2B2C? This is like out of syllabus kind of a question, right guys? I've never spoken about this in the entire session today. Where did this came from? I put this intentionally because typically when you do pre-sales, right, you end up with customer scenarios where the selling cycle of a client is typically business to business or business to customer. In some cases, it could be for B2B2C as well, which is business to consumer as well, right? And just to give you context, I had put in some kind of a twist over there where I had given the second option as business to customer versus business to consumer. What is the difference between customer and consumer? Consumer is your actual end consumer versus customer is someone who is going to use your application, right? So there's a slight difference between both of them, and that's where this becomes a bit tricky, and only 3 of them got it right. We'll see who has come up. So we have Neha, who is the highest climber. Diligent Wildcat entered into the game of 5. Let's move on to the next one. Have you ever contributed to an RFP? If yes, sorry, it got bumped, huh? Let's skip this question. Let's not count this one. I hope there's no. Let's move on to the next one. Sorry, guys. Yeah. Have you ever contributed to an RFP? True or false? Awesome. 20 of them have worked on RFP. That's great to hear. I hope this session was like meaningful and you related to every aspect of it. So Lalita is the highest climber with Mega maintaining the lead. Good job, Mega. So here you have to type it out, okay? It's not an option. Type your answers. What is an RFP? Key aspects of an RFP response. Okay, let's move to the next one. So multi-select. Yeah, something wrong with my Kahoot today. I apologize for that. But yeah, the previous question header was something else, guys. This is the right question and the right answers. All right, let's see if there are any changes. So Ankit Thakkar has moved up. Vipul has the highest answer streak of 3. What is an RFQ? Type it out. What do you mean by RFQ? I tried to be a bit innovative over here by giving new kind of responses this time around. So request for quote. You'll not find all of these kind of options in your regular Kahoots, right? Where you've been asked to type something. So let's see who's moved up. So Ankit has moved up. Let's go to the next one. Multi-select again. What are the different estimation techniques? Line item, story points, t-shirt sizing, guess estimates. Yes, guess estimates is basically a concept. Your estimation techniques are line item level, story points, and t-shirt sizing. Guess estimates is basically you are using one of the techniques to come up with the guess estimates, right? So that was a difference. So Ankit goes on the top. Type an answer. What is an RFI? Okay. No change to the leaderboard. Let's move on to the next one. What are the key aspects in a client system landscape? Third-party systems, Salesforce, integration, touchpoints, backend systems. So when you're looking at a system architecture diagram in an RFP, what are the different elements that you would look at? This is for the technical folks out there who does solutioning and architecture related work. Yes, all of them are important, not just Salesforce. So Mega again climbs into the top 3. Vipul has done great stuff. Neha is the highest climber. Again a multi-select, double the points. Oh, sorry. Let's skip this one. I messed it up, huh? Big time. All right. So this one is basically gathering the feedback for today's session. Please type out any feedback that you have. We'll give you 90 seconds to do it. Right? Good, bad, any improvements, any suggestions that you might have. Feel free to add anything. All right. 15 more seconds to go. 17 of you have answered or given your feedback. I really appreciate it. All right. Can we see the feedback as well? Thank you guys for this, and we'll see the leaderboard now. So Megha is on third position, Subhash is on second, and on the top is Ankit. Great job, guys. Well done. Vipul and Umang are the runners up. Sorry for the bit of hiccups on some of the questions. I would do a better job next time. But thank you everyone for staying on for more 11 minutes than the scheduled time. With that, we'll wrap it up, and I'll give it up to Sachin or Sagar to close the event.
Very congratulations to all of the winners. Please share your email ID on the chat window so we can configure your Udemy account. And there is one more rule over there. If you are the winner of our previous session, so you will not take the advantage of our next one. So we will check the Kahoot, and whoever is the runner for that one, we will provide the certification course voucher to him. So that is again rule for that one. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone. Thank you Rupesh, and I would also like to thanks Walid Alhor, who helped provided the Udemy course voucher for sharing and visibility for this overall series and this session as well. So thank you very much, and do post your love with the New Delhi SFDD Twitter handler or in LinkedIn. So we will accumulate the winner of our social media champion. So that will be helpful for you guys. So you can leverage the course benefit of sharing and visibility. So that's it from my end. Winners, please share your email ID with okay. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.